We are go. This is Asia Tech Podcast. My name is Graham Brown. We today are in Singapore at the Antler headquarters on Anson Road, Collision 8, joined by Tyler Norwood and Jussi Salovaara. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. It's a pleasure.
I think just for prudence sake, you're technically in Found 8.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Times have moved on.
Collision 8 and Found merged this week. So.
Okay. Up with the times. All right. Why are we here? So, a bit of context. We'll talk about the awards and the vote for Pitchdeck Asia, Best Ecosystem Builders in Asia. We'll talk about that. We had over 9,000 people vote, or 9,000 votes for that particular award category. And the purpose really being is that we spend a lot of time talking to startup founders. Yet behind the startup founders, there's a whole layer of ecosystem of people who support them. So there's accelerators, co-working spaces, funds, programs. And they aren't natural self-promoters. They aren't always out there talking about themselves and their work. They're just sort of busy, heads down, doing what they do, supporting startups, getting the next batch in, or working on a demo day, or connecting startups with investors and so on. So we want to shine a spotlight on some of their work. And joined today in the Antler headquarters, we have Tyler, and you are a partner in Antler?
Yeah, I'm a partner for Southeast Asia, and in April we'll be moving to the US. We'll be managing partner for our launch in the US market.
Excellent. So you've got big plans for growth as well. So we'll talk about the Antler story.
Yes.
And we'll talk about the kind of work that you do here. We had Magnus on the show already, and that was a really interesting conversation. And we talked about the spike, which we'll come back to, and the kind of founders that you like working with. Jussi, we've met already. It's good to have you back on the show. You're representing the Nordics today.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So a bit of background to yourself as well. You are originally from Finland.
That's correct.
Moved to Singapore when?
A year ago.
Yeah.
So I'm quite
With
fresh
Antler?
still, with Antler.
Yeah. Is that the first time living in Asia? Or?
That is the first time living in Asia, yes.
Yeah.
So I lived in London before and Finland, and traveled obviously extensively, but
How's your experience been so far?
No, it's been awesome. It's easy, safe, sort of simple in some sense here in Singapore because everything works, which is what I'm used to coming from Finland. But then at the same time, the whole ecosystem in Southeast Asia is quite complex. And you go to Indonesia, it's super different. You go to Malaysia, it's different, etc., etc. So there's so much depth and complexity in the whole ecosystem that it's not boring.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously Helsinki's a great ecosystem in itself and a hotbed of innovation. All of that part of the world. Do you think we'll see more from that part of the world come over to Singapore? Is there a trend?
Could be. I mean, there's a lot of people trying to bring Nordic things, be it startups themselves, products, etc., to Southeast Asia. We have a lot of collaboration with the likes of the Nordic Innovation House, who actually stays with us here, who try to help Nordic companies come here. There's accelerators who do the same thing, like NHAC, which is our partner as well. So there's a trend towards that direction.
Yeah.
Right now, Helsinki is a hotbed for gaming. And haven't really seen much of that yet here, meaning, Helsinki-based gaming companies coming hard to, Southeast Asia, but who knows?
It's a matter of time, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we'll talk a little bit about the internationalization theme that you've got going on here. There's a real mix. And how many nationalities do you have, in your batch at the moment? Have you counted?
I think 32.
32, yeah.
Here in Singapore?
Here in Singapore, yeah.
Wow.
Out of 100 founders we have in the program.
32 are outside of Singapore. Or 32 different nationalities.
32 different nationalities.
Where do they come from? You don't have to name all 32, but give us a flavor for what's here.
Jamaica, Brazil, Pakistan,
the US, obviously.
China, all over Southeast Asia.
And do they come to Singapore to join the program, or do you bring them here? How does that work?
What's the distinction between those
Well,
two?
so do they come here and then knock on your door and say, I want to be I'm applying for Antler, or do they then apply from Brazil or Jamaica and then they get accepted and they come over?
Yeah.
Right, so it's a big commitment.
The latter. So we do global sourcing of founders, and then at the time of applying, they can choose between the different Antler locations. So right now we have Stockholm in the Nordics live. We're soon going to have Amsterdam, London, and Sydney live as well as East Africa. And then, like Tyler said, he's going to build the US. So the founders can choose themselves, but of course we also do a lot of proactive reach outs and try to get people specifically also for the Singapore program. So it's a mix of sort of organic founder interest and us, going after certain people in very targeted fashion.
You place a big emphasis on the founders and the character of the founders.
Absolutely.
And Magnus went quite deep into that.
Yeah.
That was like his thing. So I want to talk about that because that really, for me, is my understanding of what you do here in terms of that sort of spotting talent and nurturing talent. Putting that into context is that sort of international aspect of it as well. And Tyler, you spent a bit of time out of the US as well. You were in Vietnam for a while as well. So can you give us a bit of background to your journeys?
Yeah, so 2012, was graduating university and had a bit of an existential crisis and decided to do the craziest thing I could think of. So I moved to Vietnam.
Right.
Why
was that the craziest thing?
Well, I guess...
He's from North Carolina,
yeah.
So he's sitting there.
So just to contextualize where I was coming from, I was at a school of like 11,000 students in rural North Carolina.
Right.
So
Vietnam was not discussed apart from in history books,
like
right?
Going to London would have been crazy, right? So going to Vietnam was just a sort of, I guess the way that I thought about it was, I had two options. I could either go into the very low ranks of banking and insurance, or the normal types of entry-level business jobs you have coming out of a second-tier school, or I could go do something that nobody else would do and hope that would allow me to sort of navigate around that whole period of career. I just wasn't interested in doing that at all. So moved to Vietnam in 2012. I spent 4 years there. Started off working as a tutor, helping Vietnamese students apply for college in the U.S. And then I joined Zalora in 2013. Built out their marketplace business in Vietnam first and then across Southeast Asia. Zalora got bought by a global fashion group. I got pulled up into that organization, and then from 2016 onwards traveled around the world building marketplaces in different places.
Right. So you started as a teacher effectively and then moved into corporate and then into startup.
Yeah. I started as a teacher. I think that as I get older, I really enjoy teaching. I love teaching the founders here and really enjoy
it's super helpful actually. So
you mean the teaching skill, the presentation skill?
Tyler's skill at teaching to the founders here. He's probably not going to sell himself so hard, so let me do that. But
he's an American. Come on, it comes naturally. We talked about it.
But it's more credible when I say it. But he talks about how to ideate, how to iterate on your idea, how to test it in the market, and the teaching skills are just off the charts for this young man.
Yeah. That sort of presentation. And not just explanation as well, but to really empathize with people and communicate with them as well. These are the soft skills.
Yeah.
And how important that is in the startup world, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, one thing, so 2017, embarked on my own founder journey. So built 2 different companies that both failed. One in the SaaS space for real estate, one in vertical farming.
In Vietnam?
No, actually went back to the US for a year. So I went back to Denver for a year and did that, and got a couple failures under my belt and came back and joined Antler. I had worked for Magnus for all of my time at Zalora and GFG and really, really believed in the mission. Like the opportunity to work with founders every day was really, really attractive to me. I would never be interested in joining venture capital for venture capital's sake. The investment side of the whole business is not something that I'm particularly interested in, and luckily I'm surrounded by people who are very good at that. But the founder side is what I'm really interested in. So, not only teaching the hard skills of entrepreneurship, which I think, it's to be defined what the hard skills of entrepreneurship are. If there is a set of skills that make an entrepreneur really successful, that are hard, but really focusing on the soft skills. So the communication skills. I think one thing that very few people in the ecosystem ever talk about is the emotional journey of being an entrepreneur. And one thing that I think you can see really successful angel investors and venture capitalists oftentimes have been founders themselves. And I think what that allows them to do is understand the emotional journey of being a founder. And that's something that from the outside is impossible to appreciate, because it's really hard to understand what it actually feels like to be in that situation where the next 2 weeks of your life are completely opaque, right? You have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, as well as you're in a situation, which I sort of call the existential vacuum, where you realize that throughout your entire formal education and any time you spent in a traditional job, you always have external feedback on what you're doing, whether it's good or bad. And only until you become an entrepreneur and go off into your totally own space do you realize that with the complete lack of that, it's actually very, very difficult to orient yourself. So it's like being in a zero gravity situation and trying to figure out which direction is north. And being able to understand that and empathize with that, I think, is something that the ecosystem, everyone except for the founders, needs to do a better job of empathizing and understanding what that's like.
That founder side, can we focus a little bit on that? Because that you mentioned, for example, that you were attracted to working here at Antler. Which would you call yourself an accelerator or a generator or
startup generator?
Startup generator. You're similar to an accelerator, I suppose, in the outside view in, right?
In the second phase of what we do,
Right.
The first phase, I think, is what's uniquely different about what we do.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, because you said that attracted you rather than venture capital. A lot of people kind of lump you in the same like category. Not really knowing the difference. An accelerator on the face to a lot of people looks like kind of like in that sort of same category as an early stage fund, even though you're not necessarily doing the same kind of things. In the sense of the people who work behind it. And obviously your connections are connecting startups at the other end with early stage investors and so on. Right? So let's talk about that, because you do a lot of fundamental work with founders as well, identifying founders, training founders, that sort of emotional journey as well, working on them there. Can we talk about that so people can understand what you do a little bit better here?
Sure.
You know, rather than just sort of, okay, you have a few mentors that walk around the classroom and just peer over people's shoulders and
what we do.
point out some mistakes, right? You know, this is not sort of a cram school for entrepreneurs, right?
So, I mean, first of all, accelerators and generators, the distinction. I mean, accelerators take companies, put them through a program, and out come better companies. And some of them invest, so that would make them venture capital. Some of them don't. We are a generator. We start from the individual. So we find these founders who are super skilled, driven. They have the spike. They have many other characteristics that make them stand out. We bring them here to a program as individuals, not as companies, as individuals. And then we do a lot of this fundamental work that was referred to team them up in the founding teams. We work with them on a business model, and then iterate on the team. This goes on for 2 months, and that's when we make our investment decision. So we have a fund, like I said, and we invest. And then after we made an investment decision, there's sort of a 4-month phase where they build, and that's quite closely resembles an accelerator,
like a batch.
But the thing that sets us apart is starting from the founder, and not starting from a company or a team even. So it's like a pre-team, sometimes pre-idea.
So somebody comes to you and says, here's my background, or I'm really passionate about this. And you see the talent, but maybe they don't have that, that structure, or maybe the entrepreneurial, background, or maybe they lack the technical guy in their team.
But most often it's that they don't have a team. That's like the most basic situation. Like you're super good, super driven. You want to build something, but you're struggling to find a co-founder. That's actually my personal story, where I was sitting in a comfortable, great job in a corporate, working with startups on the side. I got hit with that bug of building something of my own, and I was like, where do I find a co-founder who meets my bar, which is not low, right? And I struggled to find that. And what I then actually ended up doing is co-founding Antler. with Magnus and so forth.
Scratched your own itch. Right?
Exactly, but that's a pain I had, and I can relate to the founders in that respect. And I wish there had been an Antler program.
Yeah.
So all the founders you deal with pretty much are on their own when they come to you.
Exactly.
That stage they're at.
Exactly, and that's the thing that sets us apart.
Right.
So over this 2-month period, through a very intense program, they then form teams, work together, to refine the idea. They get sort of galvanized together as a team, and then they start building. Right.
So if I was to look, I mean, we are sitting here in the green room, so to speak, of Antler.
But hot room.
Yeah, if we were to look out there, you've got lots of different people sitting around, chatting, working together. What stage are they at in their development cycle?
Yeah. So it's week 4 right now of the program. So we had 100 people start 4 weeks ago, Jan 21.
As individuals?
As individuals. There were a few teams on an exceptional basis, but predominantly as individuals. And they've gone through this process of working with the different people in the cohort. We do a bunch of different hackathons, group exercises, team building exercises, where they get to, see each other. What is it like to work with you? So, you and I, Graham, we're having a sort of nice chat here, and, I guess we can say we sort of like each other on this level. But if we went and worked 12 hours in a competitive situation together, there's a public pitch at the end, and there's judging panels and all that, we might see different colors come out from it.
The pressure cooker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, that could lead to never want to work with you again, or this actually works. Why don't we actually continue? And through this process of iteration and trial and error, you start forming teams. So right now, out of the 100 founders, 25 teams have formed. Typically teams of 2 or 3. And they are now sort of tracked out from this pool of founders looking for a co-founder, and they're working on a specific business idea.
So you've gone from 100 individuals to 25 teams.
And then in addition, there's like a pool of still
40 ongoing. There's still 6 weeks left in that process.
Okay, so that still will change.
So we're looking at probably getting like 40, 50 teams. So the last time we ran this, which was the inaugural program here, we had 65 founders come in. They formed 29 teams. And we ended up making 13 investments.
Okay.
So, with 100 founders, looking at getting 40, 50 teams and then building 20 plus companies.
Yeah. So I think to help frame it a bit as well in a way that's very easy to understand. So we fundamentally believe that having the right team is the most important part of building any successful startup. I think if you look at any startup which is able to build traction really fast in fundraising and growth, etc., 90% of the time you look at the co-founder profile and you have this sense of like, how did these people possibly come together? Like, how did they get so many smart people to all drop what they were doing and work on this idea, right? And that if you can build a really strong team, even sometimes before you even know what you're going to work on, you have an advantage over the average startup in the ecosystem, which generally was selected more out of necessity. It's like, this is the best that we could find, as opposed to the absolute best people.
Right.
So if you look at what's happening in an Antler location, we bring in 100 founders at a batch, and we spend 4 months and hundreds of hours recruiting and screening these different founders. So for one person to come in, there's 99 other people that we've spent a tremendous amount of time selecting from all over the world with all sorts of different skill sets. And we can go into later what we look for in the founders. But for one individual person to recreate the level of talent that they're exposed to in the organic setting which exists right now, they would have to spend, we have thousands of applications that we select these 99 people out of. So for a founder to have such a talent pool in any other way, they would have to have thousands of weird, awkward coffee chat meetings, like reaching out to people on LinkedIn, etc. And the way we see it is we front load all that work for them. They show up here and they can get immediately to finding a really strong team. instead of this, every founder I think knows what it feels like Jussi said, to have a good idea or to say like, I'm ready to start my journey. And then to, you talk to a few friends, maybe you get 2 or 3 leads out of your personal network. And then you start like reaching out to people on LinkedIn and having all these sort of weird, awkward conversations where you need to test whether you could even work with this person, but at the same time you have to sort of pitch them to walk away from whatever they're doing. So it's just a strange dynamic. Whereas here, it's like everyone is here for 2 months and everyone has already decided that they want to start a full-time company. So everyone can get straight to the work of figuring out of this group of 99 other founders, who wants to solve the same problems as me? Who do I really get along with? All of that stuff. So the way I see it personally is that's the most valuable thing that we do. We don't match them. I mean, we don't say, Graham and Jussi, you guys are a perfect team. You guys have to be together. What we say is, look, we've done the work of bringing you all together. We will put on a program that allows you to work and test with each other, with who you choose. And the outcome is that 40 to 50% of you are going to A, be able to build a really strong team, and B, in the course of this 8-week period, be able to develop a business model around a problem that your team is very passionate about. And then we get to make an investment decision on which teams to support from there. So yeah, I think I wanted to make the distinction because that's the work that I feel we really do. I don't want to take any of the credit away from really while they're here. The founders are doing all the hard work. We're just here to facilitate them meeting each other, helping them, flesh out business ideas, etc. But all the work we do is prior to the program.
Yeah. I see that, and how important that is.
Yeah.
There's a real magic, isn't there, as well? If you bring somebody out of their comfort zone, and in this case, a lot of those people have come from different countries, and you've moved country a number of times. I've lived in different countries, and I find, and I don't know how that sort of transpires here, but when you step outside of your hometown, your home city, where everybody speaks the same as you, maybe looks the same as you.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in North Carolina, but it's probably not the most international place in the world. But
it's definitely not.
You come somewhere new, things happen at speed, don't they? Like you've almost left your baggage behind.
Yeah.
And you come here. I've come here to set up a business. I've burnt a few bridges.
Yeah.
And therefore I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how that sort of works here.
And also, I think one thing that's easy to overlook is convincing a very smart person to walk away from all the opportunities they have and to pursue starting a company. That's a huge deal.
Well, this is what you must have faced, right?
And there's an inverse relationship to how valuable someone would be as a startup founder and how likely they are to walk away. I mean, they have tremendous opportunity cost. So just to have 99 other people in a room who are very talented and have already made the decision that they want to start a company, that's huge. That's a tremendous amount of work already done to get people to that stage.
That's a lifetime of work, like banging your head against the wall.
Yeah.
And
like if I wanted to start a company with you right now, Graham, how long? I would have to spend 3 to 4 months of us just hanging out and socializing before I could even convince you to walk away from the podcast and to leave everything that you've been working on to join me. All that work is already done here, so you can really focus on what's important, which is finding the right person.
Absolutely. How important that is. You must have faced this frustration, like trying to convince people to come and start in your startup as a co-founder.
No, exactly. Do you have so the question is sort of, do you have pools of talented, driven people waiting for you somewhere to be your co-founder?
Yeah, that would be nice.
No, you don't. So then it's just so much legwork, and I wasn't really able to succeed with it out in the wild. Like I said, if there had been an Antler program, I would have gone all in. But it's like here, it's really high caliber people. There's like one person who's a good example of this, getting someone out of their great current job. Most recently worked at Google, McKinsey before that. Very driven, super strong guy. He was like, you see, let me be your ambassador. If you ever have any events, I'm happy to come talk to you, because I would pay to be in the program. Not like, because we pay them a grant in the first 2 months to cover living expenses. It was like, you don't have to pay me, I'll pay to be in the program, because it's so valuable to get that, pool of people. He's here. Yeah.
Yeah, he's outside. I don't know if he's in that room over there.
You're going to give him a shout out? What's his name? Does he have a name?
No, I have to agree with him on that.
Well, we can narrow it down. Ex-Google, ex-McKinsey.
Yeah.
Find him on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So
his name is Nemanja.
One of, you know, I was just writing this thought down. You know, one of the things that I think that this organization changes as well is that in the wild, there is a natural tendency for companies to be idea first, right? To say, and the reason that is, I think, is because of this co-founder problem, which is the only impetus for me to try to recruit you to be a co-founder with me is I have to have some sort of idea, right? Like I have to pitch to you something that you would be interested in working on. And so what happens is you have a lot of teams who are founded on a specific idea because that was the way that the team was recruited in. And what this creates is a very dangerous foundation for the team because, especially at an early stage, there is a 110% chance that the idea is going to change and pivot. And if the foundation of the team being together is the original idea, as soon as that idea shifts and changes, the foundation of the team all being there starts to crumble, right? And the reason you have a lot of teams break up or not be successful through the early inception stage of the company is like, hey, we all joined to build this company, but as we're doing product market fit, we realize that it's actually this company. And now, you know, there's a bit of sunk cost fallacy. Like, yeah, some of the founders will stay on because we've already come this far, but everyone's not fully on board. As opposed to, you know, we're forming a team. We could build anything, right? Like, let's figure out what we want to build. The reason we're here is because we really want to work with each other. Right. So I always use the metaphors like you would never marry someone because you think that you'd have pretty babies. Right? You marry someone because you love them, and then you have kids as an outcome. But if the foundation is we're going to have really pretty babies, e.g., like we're going to build a successful company, that's a horrible foundation to build a relationship on.
Yeah, it might not happen.
Exactly. And I think that co-founder problem is the root of so many challenges that founders face. And it's also, you see that once you become a second time or third time co-founder, there's two distinct advantages that you have. One is obviously access to capital. But I think that's actually really overstated. If you have a strong team and a good idea, access to capital is not necessarily the hardest thing to find. It's really access to talent.
Yeah, without a doubt, hands down. Agree.
If I've built and sold a company before, my ability to reach out to people on LinkedIn and say, hey, I want to build my second company is massively higher. And that is that I think is a much bigger advantage than access to capital for second-time founders.
Absolutely, especially in a place like Singapore as well, where there is a lot of alternatives. I mean, there's a safe bank, there's a safe law firm, there's a safe consultancy you can work for.
If you're a smart, talented, driven young person in Southeast Asia, there is unlimited opportunities, right? Starting a company is one of very many opportunities that you could pursue. So, you know, it is hard to find talented people. And fundamentally, you know, going back to the original question that started this whole chain of thought is the difference between a generator and an accelerator is an accelerator isn't helping to solve any of these co-founder or early stage issues. And what we fundamentally believe is those early stage issues are actually the root cause of many of the problems that tear startups apart later on. Maybe not at the acceleration phase, but even later on. And if we can solve those core issues, we can fundamentally improve and change the way that new companies are formed in a small bit, right? I mean, we can play our part as an ecosystem player. I mean, we don't ever expect to be the only way that companies are formed, right? But we can play our part to make it easier and more effective for really talented people to start companies, and for those companies to then go into the ecosystem and participate in accelerator programs to take investment dollars from all of the great VCs that are here in the ecosystem or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. And I like the fact that this conversation is out there, this discussion about talent and this discussion about some of the challenges that derail a startup and how those are sort of at the inception point of the startup rather than maybe later on.
Yeah. Even though they don't become problems until later on.
Right. And like you said the sunk cost as well. People may sort of mask it a little bit until it becomes a real crisis.
It's like, oh, we've already raised seed money.
Right.
Like I can't quit now.
Yeah.
But if you're having those kind of thoughts, you know, you raise your seed round, you still have 5 or 6 years of hard work and just existential dread to get anywhere close to being successful. So if you're having those sort of thoughts and worries that early on, there's cracks in the foundation.
Yeah, I like it. Existential dread. I like that for a conversation. All right, well, I want to ask you a question. I'm conscious of the time as well, but the question that's top of my head is that, what makes a successful startup founder? And I want to sort of fast forward. Let's sort of bypass the passion bit, because that just gets you into the game. Every single startup founder is passionate. We know that. Yeah. Like nobody would say, yeah, I just want to do it because it's a bit of fun. They do it because they believe in it. There's something more than that, isn't there?
Yeah.
And you, more than anybody, sit in front of startup founders day in, day out. You hunt them down, you reach out to them, you screen them, you train them, you teach them, you work with them, you see that every single facet of their life play out here. So you know what's good and what's not good. So with that in mind, what makes them work? And I'll couch that question in the terms of, there's this media narrative about startup founders. And we know Jack Ma, who else? Mark Zuckerberg. This is what we believe startup founders to be successful. Somebody straight out of Stanford in a pair of shorts and sandals. 2 kids, 19-year-olds change the world.
Yeah.
Or genius. He's a genius.
Yeah.
He's immortal and we're just down here. We're scratching around in the dirt and he has this talent that nobody else can have. You've seen it. Is that media narrative true? Is that how it is? Is that what you identify? What are real startup founders like, the successful ones? When they walk through that door, that guy or that girl is going to be successful.
First of all, the narrative, I would just shoot it down straight away. It's just not like that. So obviously, those cases are real, but they are outliers rather than the rule.
Well, and there's like a tremendous hindsight bias as well.
Exactly. There's a lot of research on the fact that actually more experienced founders build better companies. So that's the first, point to sort of debunk that, someone fresh from college is like before the fact the ideal founder, right? We have our founders have here on average 8 years of professional experience, so they start to know what they're doing. But then what we're looking for, passion is a ticket to play. We look for the spike, like you mentioned already, which is something that makes this founder unique. They are uniquely capable of doing something. It can be, industry expertise. It can be sort of, some functional drive that they're super good at marketing. But then the spike is only one thing, and then the 2 other elements are related to your, personal characteristics. You need to be super driven. You need to have that inner engine to be a self-starter and really drive things forward. I think you often call this sort of hustle. But you just gotta have it. And then to round it out, you need to have perseverance, tenacity. You can't give up at the face of adversity, and like Tyler called it, the existential dread. You're never gonna make it.
How do you see that? Because I imagine every potential founder sits with you and say, "Yeah, I'll never give up." But how do you know? Yeah. Because everybody will say that, and I think it's like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So how do they know that guy's going to, or that girl's going to survive when they get punched in the face by
that's
the
market? $1 million question, of course. So we look at the track record a lot and the history of what they've done. And then we have an interview methodology where we actually relive those moments of tough times, and we try to understand how the individual behaved and why they made certain decisions. So we really walk you through like we were, reliving that situation. But it's not perfect. I don't think you have a perfect answer to this question. This is one of the most difficult things to find out, especially with younger. The less experienced you are, the more difficult this is to assess, because you simply have less track, so you have less situations where you had the opportunity to quit. That's what it's about, right?
Absolutely.
Are you gonna quit?
Yeah.
So one thing I, tell founders, and one of the exciting periods of the 8-week program is everyone has a point where they're sort of at their lowest, where like something's not working. They've launched a MVP and there's no traction, or them and their co-founder have broken up, or something's gone wrong. And I think that so from an investment perspective, I mean, if we put our fund hat on for a second, right, and we talk about why we believe that Antler is going to be a more successful fund than existing early stage funds, is if I only ever get to see founders in a boardroom setting and they're at their best and they're polished and they have their pitch deck prepared, etc., the worst thing I can do is sort of ask them difficult questions. And if they have any sort of charisma or composure, they can navigate those questions fairly well. Whereas the Antler program, like, we undoubtedly, everyone here will go through a period where we get to see what they act like when things are going really bad. And that to me is the point of inflection, and that to me is the informational advantage that we have to really see, like, how does this person act when things are really bad and they're completely lost. And I always tell founders when they're at that point, I say that I'm going to give you some advice, and it may not sound useful right now, but hopefully one day you'll appreciate that advice, which is what you're feeling right now. Like, center yourself in this feeling of dread. This is what it's going to be like the whole time. It's always going to feel like this. Whatever problem that you're worried about right now, as soon as you solve that problem, 3 more will come about, right? If you're worried about raising your next round, as soon as you raise that round, then there's going to be other things that, you're going to have these small glimpses of success where you're like, you wake up in the morning and, I mean, you've built this podcast, you know what it feels like, right? Where it's like you wake up and you're like, I'm so excited about what I'm doing, etc. But those are fleeting glimpses. And I think to be a successful entrepreneur, and at the risk of, speaking on platitudes, this is obviously not universally true, but from my experience is it's being able to center and almost find a way to enjoy being in that part of the experience, because that's like 90% what it's going to be like. And, our program, there's people who think that they want to start a company, and I think our program is excellent for this group of people, which is like, they don't know what it's actually like, and they experience it and they're like, hey, you know what, actually, this is not what I want. And then they can go on with their life knowing that, hey, I thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I actually don't. I actually really enjoy the safety and the comfort of my corporate job, and that's completely fine. Like, an entrepreneur is no better than a non-entrepreneur, but you need to know whether that's really what you want. And then for everybody else, it's really about just testing and assessing, like, what's someone's endurance in this emotional state? How long can they stay in this dread? And, the really successful entrepreneurs are the ones who, I think, they have a lot of different coping mechanisms. If you take like Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, like, their coping mechanism is definitely, they don't have the same emotional makeup as a normal person, right? They're sort of somewhere on the spectrum. They're so socially
in the spectrum for sure.
They're so socially awkward that it actually doesn't affect them the same way that normal people do, which fine, and it's an edge case, but that is the way that they're able to stay in that experience. For a normal person who doesn't consider themselves sort of a eccentric founder, it's really about understanding, like, why are you there? Why are you putting yourself through that emotional experience? And if you can always answer that question, I think it helps you to get through. It's like, when someone asks you, Graham, why do you spend so much time building this podcast and working on it? The day that you can't answer that question is a hard day. It's hard to get through those days, right? So, again, talking about this sort of zero gravity environment, you have to always have that anchor that you can come back to and say, this is why I'm doing this, right? And, there's
one thing I want to add to that is that's also part where the team comes in, right? So we're not big believers in solo founders. So in those, the times when things get tough, that's where the teams, team pulls itself forward as well. So we want 2 or 3 people in the founding team for partly this purpose, many other reasons as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
To have that support. I mean, even Jussi and I, the chance of both of us being down at the same time is much lower than one of us, right? And we know each other pretty well, and I know when he's not having a good day, and he knows when I'm not having a good day, and it's like, on those days I can load him up with more stuff and take a bit of a deep breath, and vice versa.
Bring you back to that center as well, remind you, because when you're having a bad day, all that sort of talk about center is just kind of taking second, to all this the nonsense of being a startup founder, right? It's in the wild, as you mentioned already.
Yeah.
Things are happening at a pace. It's crazy. You're dealing with other people's agendas, the BS of dealing with all that sort of stuff, right? So you have to have people to back you up. And you're not always going to be, like you see on the pitch day, up there. Oh, these entrepreneurs, they're fantastic. They're always out there, high fives, all that sort of stuff. That's not what it's like. It's the existential dread, right? That's a lot of it, right? And you see these pictures, you look at internet, somebody with a laptop on the beach in Bali. I'm building a startup.
Yeah, I mean, that's just
like
complete bullshit.
It's hustle. It ain't like that.
No, I mean, there's a lot of these lifestyle founders as well who are part of the ecosystem, and the 4-hour work weekers. That book probably took more people off the successful course than it helped. It's a nice selection thing, though. So anyone who gets attracted by that shouldn't try to be an entrepreneur.
We've all read. I mean,
shouldn't try to be a startup founder.
It's an amazingly attractive proposition to outsource your life and move to all these new cities, but it's just not really what it's like. I think, one other thing that I want to mention about the founder DNA, and this is something you see a lot, is conviction. So, as a founder, you're going to spend, depending on how fast it is for you to sort of build traction, hit that inflection point, all the time before the inflection point, and I'll talk about what I think happens once you hit that inflection point. It's going to be a lot of negative feedback, a lot of no's from investors, a lot of I don't understand it, I don't get it. And you always, you listen to How I Built This and all these podcasts, and founders tend to skip over this period. The reality is that period of negative feedback could be 2 years where it's you're constantly having people what are you doing? It doesn't make any sense, etc. And with a lack of conviction, and this has happened to me. It's really hard to prevent, but you wake up in the morning and you say, I mean, let's take your podcast for example. You say, I'm going to build this podcast. It's going to be the most successful. You lay out this picture in your head, and then you go out and you have 4 investor meetings, and every single one of them is some permutation of no, it's stupid, it's been done before, this and that. And you go home at night and it's man, what am I doing?
Yeah, maybe they're right. Yeah, that's in my head now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's man, and you see it happen you see founders, like I said, in one day start off super gung-ho and then get beaten down in meetings and come back and be man, what are we doing? And you compound that over months and potentially years of just getting negative feedback. And if you don't have any conviction in what you're doing, it's easy to get stuck in this sort of carousel where it's you over adjust to every piece of feedback you get and you end up just running in circles. And it's
if you don't have the experience from that, and you don't have someone who's being the not the mirror, but the mirror with opinions, who's saying don't do that. Yeah. Take a step back. Don't overreact. It's really risky and
it's tough. You get beaten up.
And I think a good framework to think about, one way to approach this, and if I feel that I'm going into teacher mode a little bit, and
indulge us.
I'm a big fan of.
Wait, I get my textbook open.
But if you turn to page 5, if you think about all the people that could potentially help you as 100%, so that's advisors, potential employees, investors, etc. If you're building a relatively familiar business, it's not something super crazy. You're not talking about launching people to Neptune or whatever it is. Maybe 10% of the people that you talk to are on your side. So what you have to make sure is that your job is not to get 100% of people to agree with what you're doing. Your job is to talk to enough people to identify that 10%, right? So to get the N of that 10% to a place of like 10 to 20 people, of investors, advisors, et cetera, who when you talk to them about what you're doing, they're like, yes, I'm on board. And to just ignore the other 90% of the people, to say like their feedback doesn't matter, because if they're not, quote unquote, my people, I shouldn't cater to what they're looking for. Now, the crazier your idea, the smaller that percentage becomes. So if you are trying to like launch people to space, or if you're trying to build some business model.
That's a really crazy idea, by the way, Tyler. You should never do that. It's really dumb.
Yeah, exactly. Or, trying to clone human beings, like something that's really on the edge. Then you're talking about like your people is now 1% of people you talk to, or like half a percentage of people you talk to. And that inflection point I was talking about is like, it's going to be crazy until enough people get on board where you break sort of 50%. But in the beginning, your job, again, it's not to get everyone to like what you're doing, because we have this social, this anthropological drive inside us as humans to try to get everybody we talk to agree with what we're doing, like to get this positive. And like, that's not the goal at all. The goal is to talk to so many people that you can identify who are your people and build
your tribe.
People don't really understand that this is a sales process. Fundraising is a sales process. So if we talked about being a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman, everyone understands that your likelihood of hitting a yes is fairly low per door. Okay, but then people assume, okay, I'm having a fundraising discussion. I have an awesome idea. Team is fantastic. Everyone's gonna love it. And then when 9 people out of 10 say, okay, thank you. Too early for us, or whatever it is, right? Then everyone's like super dejected. It's because you're selling yourself. You're exposing everything you are. It's really tough. You should look at it as a sales process. Same thing as it is with customers, as it is with investors, advisors, and distance yourself a bit from emotionally from the kind of transaction. And it's a numbers game, like Tyler said.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to approach it with the right mental categorization. As you walk away from that meeting, not is this really a good idea based on what that person had, but you walk away from the meeting like, not my people. It's not my tribe, at least right now. Maybe in the future that is, but right now I can safely put them in not my tribe. And the next person I talk to, the same thing. My tribe or not my tribe, if they're interested. So, getting somebody to say no to your idea as quickly as possible is as valuable as having them say yes. So you can categorize them as, hey, you know what? Their feedback right now is not important. Where you should really be worried when you're fundraising or hiring or doing anything is if the people who believe in what you're doing is 0%. But like Jussi said, it's a numbers game. The N has to be high enough to really say that you took a college try at finding who your people are. And the crazier your idea, the smaller that is. But, if you've talked to 1,000 people and everyone is like absolutely dejected by what you're doing, either you're building something which is so edge case, it's going to take a much higher end of conversations to find those people, and or it's sort of good feedback that maybe you should adjust and rethink. But you can't continue to course correct based on every single little tidbit and feedback that people give you.
Absolutely. I mean, this is great advice as well.
Yeah, no, and just to make the example very concrete, there's a lot of people, like, what does it mean to overreact to the feedback? So it's, for example, you meet the VC and they tell you, this is a very interesting idea. We like it, we love the team. If you only did the same thing in Indonesia, then I would be keen. And then the team goes back and it's like, hey, if it's, if we, build this for Indonesia, it's Red Panty Night, we're going to have, big party, champagne, we get the ticket, great. And then it doesn't work like that. So you should have your own vision. Tyler used the word conviction is a good word. Is the word, and stick to that, because then let's think about this scenario. So you go back to the same VC and you said, hey, we listened to your advice. We completely changed our plans. Now we're going to Indonesia. Like, what signal is that? Like,
it's like if
wind blows this way, go this way, right?
It's like if you met a really attractive girl or guy in either case, and they said, I love everything about you, but I really prefer people with blonde hair.
Yeah.
And like the next day you showed up and your hair was bleached blonde.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
people do that.
Yeah, no, of course.
But that is a loser.
That's a much easier social situation to really understand. Like that would be such a bad move.
Yeah.
Right, as opposed to saying, yeah, okay, great, but I obviously have dark hair, so I'm gonna have to optimize for people who prefer dark hair. So
that is good advice. We understand it in those terms, but I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That sort of conviction, and combined with the fact that you've got to understand where your 10% is and go after them, right? Rather than constantly take feedback from the 90%, which is obviously by default going to be the larger, the more voluminous feedback, right?
Yeah.
So understanding that and being able to identify your 10%, and I think why these kind of ecosystems work well is because you can step out a little bit and somebody can say to you that actually that person you just met and that feedback that you got was part of the 90%. Keep going. Maybe it's more of an edge case. Maybe there is a market for going to Neptune, but you've just got to find a bigger group, a bigger sample to work with, right?
Like having people around you who are smart, understand what they're doing, and don't have the emotional connection to your particular business is super helpful.
Yeah.
Because like you're just able to look at it analytically and neutrally and assess where you might be overreacting.
They can call out the BS.
Yeah. Precisely.
And that's not to say that the conversations with the 90% who aren't your tribe, like it's still very valuable.
Don't forget them.
It's still part of the process to understand what are their objections, what sort of things. But to completely derail yourself and stop believing in what you're trying to do because of it, you have to make sure that you don't allow their opinions to creep into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, but you'll get
how important that is
from people who are skeptical of your idea is where the best critical questions on what you're doing will come from, right? It was just like, oh, actually, I never thought about that. Like, what if this were to happen, et cetera? Let's make sure we answer that, right? So the next version of the deck has something which answers that question, et cetera, but it doesn't cause you to lose faith in whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. We had that when we were starting. Well, I had that when I was starting the podcast. It would be, I don't have 20 minutes to listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
And by evidence today, we've done an hour, I think, more or less, haven't we? I mean, it just goes to show. And I say to people, look, this is not about podcasting. To your point about the 90%, you're absolutely right. I think that even though there's a lot of people out there who don't have an hour to sit and listen, and they'll easily say that, what I say to them is actually, either it's not for you, it's not for those people who don't want to listen. That's fine. I'm not going to sell it to them.
Yeah.
Or it's not about the podcast. It's about conversation.
Yeah.
And I think, what we sell effectively here is a conversation people aren't having these days. People don't sit and have hour-long conversations about stuff they really care about.
Yeah.
And that's what we're putting back on the table.
And all we needed to do is add an audience for people to sit down and talk to each other.
Right, there we go. Bingo. Well, conscious of the time, and I think this has been a really good, fascinating conversation, and we've covered some areas which I felt that we've really got deep into what you do here.
Yeah.
At Antler. I mean, obviously, the mechanics you can learn from looking at the website, of the structure of the programs and so on, but getting an understanding of the people and what you do with those people, and obviously you guys behind the program as well.
Yeah.
Because, we can go and look at your CVs and your LinkedIn profiles, but hearing you speak as well and passionate about what you do, people that will infect the right people who will get it. I think it would be an emotional decision that, I've got to be around these kind of people. Because, what we've talked about today is how important having your own support network is and people who get it, And at the early stage, you understand the frustrations that I feel as a single founder. You've been there. You empathize with me. All those kind of feelings that you go through. And whenever I start talking about my existential dread, but in different terms, I'm not going to embarrass myself. You're not going to macho me out and say, just harden the fuck up. Which is kind of very much the narrative in startup world, isn't it? You're going to say, look, I get it. I get what you're going through. That it's one good day, 2 bad days. 1 good day, 2 bad days. It's like that in startup world, right?
Like how many of those can you stack together?
Right.
Yeah, I think conflating empathizing with someone's emotional journey and encouraging them to keep fighting is a problem, right? Because like you said, like harden the fuck up, having perseverance and fighting through hardship doesn't mean that, you never experience hardship, right? Or that you don't need
We're
people
not
to
robots,
empathize.
right?
Yeah, that you
People are
don't
not
need people to
robots.
empathize with what you're going through. You know, sometimes, you know, Jussi and I, at least once a week, we'll sit down and he'll either complain about something to me or I'll complain about something to him. And it's not about not being hard. It's about, you know, you need someone to empathize with you and just get it off your chest and say, all right, you know, it's not that bad, or to contextualize it for you, et cetera. And, you know, like I said, back to the original point, you know, the whole ecosystem needs to understand that the founders are the heroes. They are the workhorses. They are the ones going through the entire journey. And everybody else is sitting on the sidelines and, you know, waving their flags and rooting for them and supporting them in some way. But it's like, you know, if you think about a race car driver, like VC is the gasoline. If, you know, the race car crashes and explodes, the founder could die. And we're just like, we'll lose some of our gasoline, right? So, you know, remembering that, being empathetic to what the founders are going through and helping them through that journey is something that the ecosystem needs to be more aware of, and at least have an understanding and appreciation for.
There are some unsung heroes in the ecosystem as well. I know
A lot of them.
Founders like to position themselves in heroic, mythical terms as, you know, we are the martyrs. We're out there facing life and death on a daily situation.
Yeah.
But there are you guys as well that support, and it brings me round to the awards as well, just sort of finishing up as well. We do have a proper trophy for you. So, I mean, we did have a vote, and we had, 7,300 votes, and we asked founders, investors, and accelerators as well to vote and choose who were the ecosystem builders that supported founders across Asia. So we had all the familiar names in there, like, you know, it wasn't just Singapore. We had China Accelerator in there. We had Betatron from Hong Kong as well. So there's a lot of support from people doing great work. Yeah. And obviously, Antler got in there as well.
All right.
I mean, look at that. You got 252 votes, and you came in at number 6. So, with that in mind, I'd like to present you.
I'm quite competitive, so I'm not very happy about that.
You're not happy? Well, there's room for improvement. It's B+, I think, in the scorecard.
Exactly.
There's always next year.
Exactly.
How about
There's
that?
always next
But
year.
Can we call for a revote after this podcast goes live and see if we go up or down the scale?
Just keep revoting until you get the result you want, right? Okay. So with that in mind, I'd like to present this outstanding contribution to the startup ecosystem in 2019 to Antler.
Thank you very much.
Well done, guys.
Awesome.
All right. Appreciate it.
Thank
and
you.
you can keep the box as well.
Oh, great.
There you go. So you put that on
Beautiful.
your corporate mantelpiece.
Yes.
But I think, you know, there's a bit of fun doing the voting. And obviously, we had a lot of people vote. To get people out of their busy lives to say that I actually believe in this startup ecosystem, I believe in Antler or whoever they voted for, I think it's a vindication of the work you do, because it's not just helping people's businesses, but you're helping people's lives, right? Startup founders believe in it, right? You've helped me do what I want to do. Therefore, you know, I want to give some spotlight to you guys. So thank you very much for taking part. And thank you for all the work you do and taking part today. This is Tyler Norwood and Jussi Salovaara, Graham Brown, signing off from the Antler HQ here on Anson in Singapore. Yeah, and let's do something else in future. I think we had a good conversation today. We could have gone on.
Definitely.
We could have gone even deeper on different areas.
I was gonna offer for us to just keep sitting here and
barely scratch the surface.
But thank you so much, Graham. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Excellent. I think we're done. Good.